Welcome back to the BPOS podcast. As always, if you are watching on Spotify or YouTube, listening on Apple or any of the other podcast platforms, please leave a review, subscribe. I read every single one of the messages I get, and it helps the podcast get out there. Today, I am joined by Maria Hatch-Bowersock, and Maria and I are actually gym friends, but we don't really know each other that well. We're going to get to know each other today, and we're going to get into this, but her story is, it's almost an unbelievable story. As I began to learn more about what you've been through, like I said in my message, it's kind of hard for me to wrap my head around, you know?
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I can imagine. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. You know, what's funny is the way this all came about, I haven't told you this yet because I thought it would be kind of wild. But I was making a post on social media, and I'm one of those people that I'm a post and ghost kind of person. Like if I have something to put up there, I'll put it up and then I kind of forget about it. So I posted, and I can't remember which platform it was, but whatever it was, it has this, suggested for you section.
Yeah.
And I never look at that. And I glanced down at it, and one of them was your picture. And I was like, oh, I know her, but I never knew your last name.
Right.
And I was like, I know her. And then I clicked on your profile, and one of the videos that came up was how you dedicated a workout to your lost brother.
Yes.
And so I had sent you a message, and I was like, oh, man, I'm so sorry. And I don't know if you remember, but one of the things I said is, as somebody who's lost a child, please, extend my condolences to your parents as well. And then your message back to me was just like,
yeah.
What?
Yeah.
So we're obviously we're gonna get into all of that history, but I guess before we get started, I mean, why don't you, pre-tragedy, why don't you give me a little background on Maria?
Yeah. Well, to give some background, I'm going to start as a child.
Okay.
Because it gives some context to
Absolutely.
the first tragedy. So I grew up with a single mom. The man in our life that was our dad was abusive in every way that you could imagine. And my mom raised us, and he was in our life. So it was like this, she was our safe place, but we were experiencing so much abuse at the same time that there was just this very real lived experience of safety and fear just constantly that lived in my body. And when I was 18 years old, my mom met a man named Steve at the YMCA. She was taking a cycle fit class, and he was there. And I remember her coming home and telling me she met this man, Steve. And she said, you probably have seen him on the news. And he was on the news because about 8 years prior, he had lost his family in a plane crash. And I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, that doctor that lost his whole family. And I just remember feeling like, oh, it was so terrible and tragic. And what I didn't know is they had connected. And they kept it pretty private until things got serious, because at this point I'm 18. I have a brother and a sister. And so mom getting married is like it'd be a big deal, a big life transition, you know? So until they were serious, they waited to kind of introduce him and his son that survived the plane crash into our life.
So the plane crash that he was in, his son was also in.
Yes.
And survived.
Yes.
So he survived, son survived.
Yes.
But everybody else was deceased.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And my dad, I call him dad. He ended up adopting me. Spoiler alert. So I call him dad because he was a dad to me.
Yeah.
Like more of a dad to me than anybody I had ever known. Like he was safe. He was secure. and he loved us. And so my dad had a private like aircraft
Mm-hmm.
place where that he owned, and he would fly like as a hobby. And they had a lake house in Michigan, and so they were flying back. This plane crashed. They were flying back from the lake house in Michigan, and it was as they were the weather was bad, and as they were landing, the wing hit a telephone pole, and the back of the plane hit. The entire family that died was in the back of the plane. And my dad and my brother, Steve and Austin, were in the front of the plane. And my dad was able to get Austin out, and he went back into the plane to try and save his family. So when I met him, he was burned. Like 30% of his body had third-degree burns on it. And that is, that was how getting to know them and their story. And I remember meeting him for the first time. I went to his house, and I was so like, I don't want nothing to do with this man. Like, we have a happy life. Like, I don't need somebody to come in and uproot my life.
Okay.
Like, wanted nothing to do with him. And I remember we went over to his house. He had a party and was hosting a lot of people. My mom was introducing me to him and to his son. And I was just really cold-hearted. I'm like, I want nothing to do with this.
Yeah.
But he asked me, do you want me to show you around the house? So he showed me around his home that he shared with his wife that passed and his family that passed. And I was like, whatever, I'm just doing this to be polite. But he took time away from his party, and he's showing me around. And I remember the first time my heart melted was walking up the stairs, and he took me into his son Ian's room. And he started explaining, this is my son Ian's room, who was 3 years old when he died. And he said he loved airplanes. That's why we have the wallpaper airplanes. And here's his bedspread. And it was like, oh my God, like this man lost his 3-year-old son.
Mm-hmm.
And then he showed me Austin's room, who was still alive. And it was like, oh my gosh, Austin and Ian shared a room right next to each other. Then he took me into Lindsay's room, his daughter. And I remember seeing a sign, no boys allowed, on her door. And it was like, she made this sign. And like, he showed me her stuff. He let me keep one of her things. And it was like, my heart just like went from, I want nothing to do with you, to you've lost so much, and you're inviting me into your world.
Yeah.
Like, and you're letting me touch things that mean something to you. And you're giving me things that mean something to you. And it spoke a lot to me. And I remember leaving that house, and I was like, man, I don't know what just happened to me.
Right.
But it's like my heart broke open for somebody that I had just met.
Wow.
And his story was no longer like a news story. It felt like
It's personal.
it was personal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have, and this is more just kind of my curiosity more than anything else, but did he ever talk about his experience trying to rescue his family from a burning airplane?
Mm-mm.
No?
No.
Yeah,
No.
I can't even imagine like what that's like.
Yeah, I cannot either.
Okay.
I cannot either. And what I will say about my dad is he was one of the strongest people I know, in that the experience he went through didn't make him hard. It made him so soft.
Wow.
And I think a testament to that, or proof of that, is the fact that when my mom and him got married, he adopted us.
Yeah.
Like,
And you had a sister, right?
a sister and a brother.
And a brother. Okay.
And fun fact is, his son was named Austin, and my biological brother is Austin.
Oh.
So we had 2 Austins in the family,
How funny.
which was not a fun fact at the time. The boys
Right.
were like, oh my gosh, like, I don't want to share the same name as you, especially my brother.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was, I mean, it was so unnecessary. Like, they got married, and we could have just been like that could have just been my stepdad. But the heart behind why he adopted us and my mom adopted his son is they did not want step. They wanted us to know that I'm not just marrying your mom because I love your mom. I want you. And in fact, my dad asked to adopt me before he even married my mom.
Wow.
Just, it was, and I don't know if I wrote about this in the book. I can't remember, but I went to him and I asked him, I asked my mom, I said, do you think he'd ever adopt me? Which speaks a lot to how far from where I started when I want nothing to do with him to, do you think he'd adopt me? I mean, I'm 18 years old. Like, there's no reason that I need to be adopted.
Right.
It was more of I've never had a dad, you know. I've never been wanted as a daughter. And she said, well, you should ask him. And I was in his kitchen and I'm like, Mom, I'm not going to ask him if he would adopt me. And she said, no, you should ask him right now. And he said, what are you saying? And he said, why don't you come over here? What are you saying? I said, well, I was asking Mom if you would ever adopt me. And he opened the drawer right there in the kitchen, this junk, it was his junk drawer, opened it, pulled out the paper, and they were adoption papers.
Oh my gosh.
They were already signed, completed. He said, all I need is your signature and it's done.
Wow.
And we have a picture of my adoption day. But like at 18 years old, it wasn't an actual need.
Yeah.
You know, it was just, I want you, I love you. And so that's why I'm like, I call him dad.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is something a dad does
Yeah.
for their daughter. And we would go out to dinners and waitresses would be like, there would be times where we would hear, oh, you two look alike. And he goes, oh, I know. He goes, I've been knowing her since she was this big. And I just loved it, like how he owned our story that was so untraditional.
Yeah.
Taught me how to own the untraditional pieces of this story, you know, like, because when they died, and we'll get into this, like the news and the media told a story that really caused me to question my belonging in the family, you know, because I wasn't the real daughter,
Right.
you know? And so it was watching him and listening to him respond to our story, like what adoption allowed me to then heal when he wasn't there and really own the fact, no, I am his daughter.
Yeah.
You know?
You may not be his biological daughter, but you
Mhm.
are his daughter
Mm-hmm.
for real.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a journey to get there. I mean, but
So, your brother and sister, so you had this heartwarming experience with him. Did they have a similar experience?
I don't know if they did. And you know, that's kind of their story, and I don't want to speak for them in that, but I know that they each had their own story with that.
Right.
We also have different experiences. Like their dad was still alive. We have different dads, and my dad just wasn't in the picture since I was born.
Interesting.
So
Okay.
my mom had me when she was 18.
Got it.
And yeah, so you know, different experiences
Yes.
that come along with that.
Yeah. This, it just keeps getting
I
more
know.
complicated.
I know. I know.
Yeah.
I've been in counseling sessions, just, you know, PTSD and all of that. And what we've had counselors like start with the family tree, and they'll start writing my family tree, and then I bring in more, and they've like had to get a new paper and be like, okay, wait, hold on. So who's your biological dad?
Right.
Who's your stepdad? And so this is your adopted dad. And it's just layer after layer.
That's a lot.
Yep.
That's a lot.
Yep.
Wow. Okay. So then your mom
Mhm.
and dad get married,
Yes.
and I guess everybody moves in together, and you've got
Yes.
one big happy
Yes.
family.
We move in together. Yep. One big family. You know, we're all transition,
Yeah.
right? Like on the outside, and this is very much a big part of, I think, my journey as a person is on the outside, it appears one way, and on the inside, there's real transition. You're dealing with a family that lost their family.
Yep.
And you're dealing with another family that has been through a world of abuse.
Yeah.
And then you're merging. And it's not all, sunshine and roses.
Right.
Though that is the story that we like to hear, is like, here's the before and here's the after. And we often don't talk about, or we bypass the journey of the mess. There is a mess, but there's also beauty in the mess.
Right.
And so we were one big family. And I will say, like, for me, it was really beautiful. Like, I am so grateful we got 7 years together. And it was the most healing 7 years I needed. Like, I really needed that. And life was peaceful.
What about it was there anything in particular that was healing and peaceful?
Yes. Dad.
Okay.
The connection with a man that loved me like a dad truly, truly healed like abandonment that existed in me. And it also just provided space for me to be, this is going to might sound weird, a kid. Even though I was 18 years old, I never got to be a kid.
Right.
I was very much parentified as a kid. It was never okay. Nobody, my mom never said this directly, but there just wasn't space to feel. And my feelings complicated what was already complicated. So I learned very early on to just be tough and be strong and to carry and bear the weight of, really my mom.
Yeah.
Like, what did you need, Mom? And I'll be that for you. And I really, it just was the parentified daughter. And I say that while also, like, I love her so much, and have so much respect for her as a single mom.
Mm-hmm.
So as I've healed over the years, there is this, I never felt like it was okay to share my experience. Like, it would be dishonoring or like speaking ill of somebody else. But I'm learning that it's okay. Like, even right now, it's like, there's a part of me, it's like, oh, should I even say that? But it's honest, and it is a part of my experience. And so I got to be a kid, and it was weird. Like, I remember a specific time where I was correcting my brother or my sister. And we had, had our own tension relationally, my sister and my brother. It's like, no wonder I'm parenting them. Like, who wants that?
Wow.
Who wants to be parented by their sister?
Right.
But it was an actual dynamic that, like, I learned and was needed at one time.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't needed. And I remember the one time when my mom was like, Maria, you're not a parent. You're not their parent. And this was when she was married to Dad.
Mm-hmm.
And it offended me because I'm like, well, this was okay at one point. This is what you wanted at one point. And so it challenged me in my role of like, well, what does this mean for me now? Well, Maria, it means that you're a kid. Like, it means that you're her child. You're not her equal. And so as though it was like it was painful and messy, and still in some ways I'm learning, and I'm growing through that. But I'm also, it's the right relationship,
right.
So their marriage provided space for me to be human.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that totally makes sense. All right, so you and your mom both experienced this, this abuse and this trauma and all that sort of stuff. Were you guys close?
Very.
Okay.
Very, very close.
Yeah.
I through therapy, I'm now realizing that the closeness wasn't as healthy as I thought it was. When we haven't even gotten to this, but when she died, I didn't know how to live. Like, I really did not know how to live. Like, my identity, who I was as a person, was so wrapped up in my mom and pleasing my mom that I didn't even realize the depth I did not even realize to the depth of what it was. But I never really made an independent decision without checking it with her and getting her approval and making her happy and making her feel good about herself was such an important part of who I was. Like, I didn't know myself outside of that. And so we were close, but to the degree and how that looked, like, I don't know. Like, to be honest, there was a year recently. It wasn't, so they died in 2011, and it was about 2 years ago. I think I was finally feeling, as I was working through just childhood trauma and doing EMDR, realizing I'm angry. And for a year, I didn't want to talk about her. But in my way, that was like, I don't want to talk to you.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes you need space, and I don't want to talk to you right now. Well, I can't do that, so I don't want to talk about her, you know? But it was not out of a place of hurt, though I was hurt. It was out of a place of, I need to heal.
Yeah.
I need some time to heal. I never should have been parentified, and I needed to sit with that for a while. And since I have, it's like that closeness is back, but now in a healthy way.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's great.
And I just wish there's moments where I'm like, oh, Mom, I wish you were alive. Like, I wish that we were shopping and had this relationship. Like, I wish this Maria could be in a relationship with her.
Yeah. No, it makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense. Well, when you guys blended together as a family, I mean, what kind of things what did y'all do? What are some good memories that you have from that time?
Traveled.
Yeah.
I loved our vacations. We would go to Florida. And we went to the lake house. That was like our heaven on earth.
Yeah.
It was in Michigan, and still like fond memories visiting it with them not there. Like, it just really is like a slice of heaven where we just all were there. We would just be.
Yeah.
And also like dinners, going out to dinners. And my dad, he was so dorky, but it brought out something in all of us where like a family dynamic of like, I would always laugh. My mom would give me crap for laughing at my dad. And, you know, my brother would get annoyed. I'm like, this feels like a family.
Yeah.
You know, you're not carrying the weight of the world on you, and you're having a family dinner.
Yeah.
And so that, I loved those family dinners.
That's cool. And it's got to be, I mean, it has to be somewhat tough for you to go through life and not to experience that until you're 18, 19 years old or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know. Does it make it better or worse?
Yeah, well, it was all I knew.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't know anything else. And even pre-dad, my mom, you know, did the best she could with what she had. And like, it was good to me.
Yeah.
Like, it was enough. That's why I didn't want him to come in my life.
Right.
I'm like, I'm good.
Mm-hmm. At least you thought you were good.
At least I thought I was.
Yeah.
And then I don't think to experience a family like that, I didn't know I needed it until you have it. And you're like, whoa.
It's an amazing story. It really is. And I almost don't want to leave this because we're like in this happy place right now.
Yeah.
But then you go through another incredibly tragic experience.
Yeah.
You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, before I go into that, so my dad, after the plane crash, I do remember him sharing, like, because he was flying again by the time I met him.
Right.
And I remember him sharing why, because I asked, like, how are you okay with flying? And he told me, actually, I wasn't, and I wouldn't have. But Austin wanted to fly again. And he was like, Dad, why would we drive when we can fly and get there faster? And it was a part of Dad, Dad really took this stance of like, we need to move forward. We can't live in the suffering.
Right.
And so because Austin wanted to, or at least that's how the story was told to me by him, is it's what got him to get back to what he loved to do. Like Dad loved to fly. And so he started flying Austin to different tournaments and whatnot for sports.
Another thing too, I mean, what are the chances of being in 2 plane crashes in your lifetime?
So that's
right?
what I was going to get to, is like a lot of people then would ask me what I asked Dad.
Yeah.
Because I would fly with Dad. Aren't you afraid of flying with him? And my response was, no. What are the chances of it happening again? In fact, I feel safer.
Right.
I felt so much safer. And just like with anything we go through, it's like we learn from it. Is like, what went wrong and what can I do to fix it?
Right.
And he did that. What went wrong? What can I do to fix it to ensure that this never happens again? I felt there was not a doubt in my mind. And statistically,
right.
the chances of getting into a plane crash, statistically speaking, the chances of getting into a plane crash twice, like it's unheard of.
Right.
It's unheard of.
Yeah.
So this was, it was just before the 4th of July. My mom and I had a plan to go to the lake house 2 weeks prior, get the lake house ready and prepared for the 4th of July. We were going to drive my great-grandma with us. The weekend before, my dad and my mom and my brother decided to go on a quick weekend trip to visit his dad, my papa and Nona.
Okay.
That's what we call him, his dad and mom. And my mom sends me a text as they're flying out that says, I love you. I won't take my mind off of you. And I jokingly responded, because she had just gotten back, quick rewind, she had just gotten back from a week-long trip over in Joplin.
Okay.
I don't remember if you remember when all that went down with Joplin. She was over there helping do some crisis work. And so she had just gotten back. And I was like, so I joked back with her, stop leaving us. That was the last communication I had. That night, I remember having this thought of like, I hadn't heard from them. And my mom and I talk all the time.
Right.
And then a phone call comes in from my papa, my dad's dad. And, excuse me, I think I told you they were flying to visit them. That's not true. They were just flying for a weekend trip because Papa was on his 50th wedding anniversary in Italy.
Oh, okay.
So Papa calls, and I immediately am like, why is he calling me? He's in Italy. And I had a BlackBerry phone, and it went dead as I'm going to answer his call. And I'm like, you've got to be fucking kidding me.
Right.
And so I charge it, and it takes forever to charge.
Yeah, right.
In that time, my body knew. I can't explain it. I had heard from my mom. I always hear from my mom. I hadn't heard from my mom.
Yeah.
And they died. The plane crashed and they died.
That's what was
That was exactly my thought.
Mm-hmm.
They died. I start pacing the room and hyperventilating. And so my brain, because I'm like, Maria, you know how you try to reason with yourself. Maria, you don't know. You're jumping to conclusions. There's no way that this plane crash happened twice. But then it's like my body knew. So I beat the bed screaming, why God? How could you do this? How could you just screaming. Only like people that have lost somebody tragically understands this guttural, like your whole being is just like crying out. And then I get up and I'm like, no, Maria, you don't know. So there was just this back and forth with myself.
Mm-hmm.
The phone lights up and I go to it and he's already calling. And I'm like, shit. I answer it and I'm like trembling. I'm like, Papa? He goes, Maria, are you sitting down? I said, Papa, just tell me right now, are they dead? And he goes, Maria, they're dead. And I was like, no, like just no. And I just fall to the floor and he goes, Maria, I need you to be strong and go tell your siblings.
Oh, good God.
Well, going back to all my childhood stuff, be strong. Like I'm made for this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, be strong in tragedy. I got this. And so I go in and out of this, like, I've got this. I got to go tell them I can't do this.
Mm-hmm.
How is this real? My phone is blowing up. I drive over to my parents' house where my sister and brother are. And at this time, I didn't know Austin was in the plane. I thought it was just my mom and dad. And I get to my parents' house. I see, for context, Austin Thomas is my biological brother.
Okay.
Austin James is my dad's son.
Okay.
So I get to my mom and dad's. I see Austin Thomas standing outside the house, and I see Brittany. And I walk up, and I told my sister prior to coming.
Mm.
We talk. They find out. Like, it was awful. I see my brother's car, Austin James, in the driveway. I can't find him. I'm trying to call him, blowing his phone up, and I'm like, where the fuck is he? Like, I was getting angry at him.
Right.
I see my dad's business partner, pull up, and he walks up. And I go, I can't find Austin James. I'm supposed to tell the family. Like, it was like I was just in this.
You're on a mission.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he goes, Maria, Austin was in the plane. He's probably not going to make it. And I walk over and I just puke. Like, it was like, what? And I remember looking up at the moon and the stars, and it was pitch black. And I was like, what is my life? Like, what has just happened? And I go into the house. I don't remember how I got there. Like, I go in the house. I didn't want to be in the house. It was all quiet. And then I realized it's all quiet. Where are the dogs? And then I found out the dogs were in the plane.
Oh,
like, my sister's
Jesus.
running around the house trying to find the dogs.
Right.
The dogs are in the plane. It's just like one more. It's like my whole our family's gone. Like, they're just gone.
Yeah.
Like, gone. And you want to run and go somewhere. You want to go to them, but there's nowhere to go. They're gone. Like, the plane has crashed. There's no, like, body. It's gone. And it was just this, what has happened? What is happening? And from there, we found out my brother had made it through the night, but he likely wouldn't make it. And it just kept being that way. And so finally the weekend went by, and I get a call from a family member saying, Maria, we actually need you at the hospital. Like, you need to be here. And I was like, guys, I can't. Like, I can't move my body. And they were like, well, we actually, you have to be here. We'll tell you when you get here. And I'm like, okay. So I got there. Austin, my brother, Austin James, who was in the plane, he was in Michigan at the hospital where the plane had crashed. And they pulled me into a room, some family members, and sat me down and said, are you aware of the guardianship situation? I said, what do you mean? Your mom and dad redid the will, and you are the guardian of Austin.
Wow.
So we need you here because you have to be here, not necessarily to make decisions. I had help in family, but like, as far as execution, like, it was the guardian had to be present,
Right,
and be there. So, yeah, that whole, like, it was, our worlds flipped upside down and then flipped upside down and then just like kept flipping. And then you have the angle of the media there, who was just so hungry for a story. 2-time plane crash. And so then you have to hide your grief because you can't they're looking for pictures and story. And it was just a a whirlwind.
You know, that part of it, as I learned more about this story, that part of it kind of, it fascinates me. How the hell do they so quickly descend on you and then have, I mean, how does this happen? How do they, then they find out where you live and they find out what hospital you're at and they find out, you know, your whole backstory. How does that happen?
I have no idea, but it felt violating and invasive. And it became quickly clear that they were looking for one story and they did not care how they got it. They just were going to get it. Like they were on our parents' lake house property the day of the crash. And I remember getting a letter from a news station asking me if I wanted to make a statement. And we had decided as a family we're not making statements. Mm-hmm. And the reporter said, well, if you don't make a statement, that's fine, but we're going to still tell this story. We just wanted to give you a voice. And I was like, that doesn't feel like you want to give me a voice.
Yeah. We're going to tell your story for you, whether you like it or not. But if you want to say something, yeah, we'll do it.
Yeah.
All right. When you say they're looking for one story, mm-hmm. what is it that they were looking for, in your opinion?
In my opinion. Mm-hmm. So in my opinion, from my perspective, it was the 2-time plane crash.
Yeah.
And the new, like, this is, you know, it's unfolded, right? So like in the beginning, like the very beginning, the fact that it was 2 times of a plane crash, mm-hmm. like they were looking for, in my opinion, fault, reason, information that it's like, it's not your business.
Yeah.
And this is a real family that is going through real tragedy. They wanted to know how Austin was at the expense of him and at the expense of our family. There was just no privacy that was just even respected. And on one hand, I'm like, it's the news, it's the media, like that's what we do, or that's what they do. That's what they're hired to do. And on the other hand, it's like, man, we're human beings. Mm-hmm. From there, though, because there has been news and publicity, but it's been respected, you know? Like I would say the first ESPN did a story, mm-hmm. and they were so respectful, like so respectful. So I don't want to bash all aspects of the media, because there are some that wanted to tell the story.
Yeah.
And then there are some that just wanted a story that they knew was going to be clickbait.
Yep.
And unfortunately, the majority wanted the clickbait. The minority wanted the story.
Yeah.
But we got to interact with that minority.
That's great. Yeah, I watched the ESPN one last night, and it was not sensationalized.
Yeah.
Right. It was actually a heartfelt story. Yeah.
Yes. And I can tell you behind the scenes, those men, like even down to Chris, who did our interview, you know, he's on the red carpet interviewing like celebrities, and he absolutely knows what people want to see. Mm-hmm. But he cared to honor our story. And so did the producers. Like they really cared. They walked in the home. They walked into my home and they treated it as if they walked into my home. And they asked, how are you doing? How can we, you know, tell us what part of your story that the media has told that has been, you know, these are my words, but this is how I metabolized it. What parts are triggering? And how can we tell it in a way that is more accurate and honoring of you and your whole family and what you were? And so what you see in that production, it's called Miraculous.
Yeah.
The Austin Hatch story. It's an actual representation of their heart. And I love, that's authenticity to me. Is like that's media that's worth it.
Yeah.
That's worth telling the story when people actually care to tell the story.
Right. Well, the thing that I liked about it too is they brought in people who were genuinely, you know, touched.
Yeah.
That, you know, like Austin's coach, his basketball coach.
Yeah.
Like you could tell he was like it had an impact on
Yeah.
him, major impact.
Yeah.
How old were you guys at this time?
I was 24, 16 weeks pregnant.
Okay.
Yep. My sister, oh gosh, now you're having me do math. I don't know. My sister's 3 years younger than me.
She's 21.
Yeah. And then my brother, I think, would have been 20.
Okay.
20 or 19. And then Austin James, who was in the crash, was 16.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a lot for a group of young, I mean, some of your kids.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously you're an adult.
Yep.
Your sister was an adult, but
Yeah.
that's still,
Yeah.
that's a lot to have to deal with.
Yeah. It was a lot.
Did you have anybody that was a support system for you that came around?
Yeah, we did. We had a lot of people came around and supported. We had a lot of people that were all hands on deck. We couldn't have done it, without the support.
And were those people friends, family, or a combination?
Friends
Okay.
and family,
Yeah.
a combination. Yeah. Yep.
I always, and you don't have to get into any details if you don't want to, but I always like to also ask, were there any people that you expected were going to be there for you but weren't?
Honestly, that season was so tremendously hard.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in such survival that I don't even know.
Yeah.
Like, to be honest with you, Mike, I don't even know that I was showing up for myself because I was white knuckling it so much. And I was in so much of like, we got to do this. Like, we got to do this. Like, Austin's healing. Austin is learning to live again, to talk, walk, all the things. Like, it has to be all about this. And then it has to be all about this. And I was totally abandoning the fact that I needed to grieve.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know that a lot of people were there. And I'm sure that there were some people like not,
Yeah.
but I don't even think I was in it.
Right.
Like, I was so detached and dissociated
Mm-hmm.
and just doing the next thing to survive.
Which is super common. I mean, I know from my own personal experience, I've been there as well. And then, I mean, I've had people on the show, same thing. Like, it's like, all right, I'm just going to stay busy.
Yeah.
And that's my way of dealing with this, is really by not dealing with this.
Yeah.
And I always tell people, like, it's such a normal human response.
Yeah.
However, as you know,
Mm-hmm.
grief, if you don't deal with it, it just waits.
Yeah.
It totally waits. And it doesn't matter if it's a week,
Yep.
a month, a year, 10 years.
Yep.
I mean, it's going to be there
Yeah.
until you finally deal with it.
Yep. Yeah. There's no outrunning it. There's no escaping it. And at some point, the body takes over and is like, enough. Like, I need to deal. And I think that's what happened. I don't think that is what happened for me is, you focus so much on the external, what needs to get done and what you need to do, and then just totally abandon what's going on in your internal world. And that will absolutely catch up with you at some point.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I have pour into my brother, pour into having kids, pour into all these other things, and internally have totally neglected how I am. And so, that did catch up with me. It took about 6 years.
Wow.
But it definitely caught up with me. And yeah, I know I've shared this with you, but like, grief has really been a teacher to me to be present. And that has been something that I haven't known how to do. And I didn't even know how to name my feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not as a result of grief. That's a result of childhood stuff that I never developed that skill. And it seems so easy, but it's like, I was constantly, well, I'm angry. Well, is it okay to be angry? Should I be angry? How do I fix that anger?
Right.
How do I get rid of that? I was always how do I jump? How do I bypass this? How do I fix this? It was all about fix. And I learned like healing and fixing are two totally different things.
For
and
sure.
Grief taught me, like, you can't fix me. You can only feel me. You can only be present with me. Like, you have to allow your body the process and the time to be, and then you heal. Like, the only way to healing is to feel. And there is no fixing. Like, you're not an object that's broken. You're a human being that deserves to be seen. And a part of being seen is me being able to take responsibility and name, what are you feeling? And that took me a long, long, long time to learn how to just name what it is I'm feeling and then sit with it. Like, it's okay. Like, you feel angry, you feel sad, sit there. Like, don't try to change it.
Right.
Just be there with that. And that took, it took a very, very long time. But leading up to that, I was white knuckling life for probably 6 years after mom and dad died in 2011. And, externally, I poured myself into Bible studies and leading, I started a nonprofit. I wrote a book. I was on podcasts. I was doing all the things that externally, it was like, look at this woman who overcame so much.
Right.
Isn't she doing amazing? Well, internally, I was dying inside.
Yeah.
I was drinking, blackout drunk so much, or brownout. Like, I was not okay. Like, if you're drinking that much, you're numbing and a tremendous amount of pain that you cannot bear.
Yeah.
And I was running and I was not okay. But like, I could tell all these people I was okay.
Right.
And so I thought, well, maybe if I just get my external world under control, it will bleed into my internal and I'll have peace. But it never happened that way.
No.
Never happened that way.
Yeah.
And it got to a point 6 years into mom and dad's death, me not knowing how to live, raising babies, drinking a bottle of wine at least 3 to 5 times a week, like it's nothing. And that I was like, I can't do that. I just felt like I was in this black hole that I couldn't get out of, and no amount of work. And I'm a worker. Like,
right.
We do CrossFit. Like, we lift heavy weight. I got this.
Right.
I got this, but I don't have this, and I can't get out of this. And it's just always going to be dark. And I'm this burden to my family that I had this thought. And I hope it's okay to like go here on this podcast. But
Sure.
I had this thought of, I lost my mom. And I understand what it's like to lose my mom. Maybe it would be better for my kids if they grieve me than watch me unravel. And so I took steps, to do that, because I really, really believed that the most sacrificial thing I could do was like, I'm going to be a mom on the streets. Like, I'm Maria, who has it all together, and I don't have it together. And my family can't reconcile that.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody wants me to have it together, and I don't know how to have it together. And so maybe it's just best if I exit and let them grieve the image. And I can just be out of this. So that way because I can't fight this anymore. Like, I don't know what's going on with me. But I had a moment, like a come to moment, where it was like, what the fuck are you doing, Maria? This is not the solution. You have so much fight in you. You have a fire in you that if you're willing to go this far, why not just give it a shot and heal? But I had no context of what that meant. Like, trauma was not really talked about.
Right.
PTSD wasn't really talked about. But I walked back into the house and I'm like, okay, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm gonna keep trying. And long and short of it, and a lot of failure later and a lot of mess ups later, I checked myself into a psychiatric hospital because I'm like, I don't even know what else to do.
Wow.
And I was like, they have an intake. So you do an intake before they check you in. And so I told them about this, this experience I had. And I'm like, I'm serious. Like, I don't know what to do. And the lady that took my intake said, Maria, we're not going to check you in. You don't belong here. We're not going to be able to help you, but you have severe PTSD and you need to be in counseling and in therapy with somebody that knows how to handle this kind of therapy.
Interesting.
And so that was the first time I heard you have PTSD. And I found a therapist who was certified in EMDR, which I don't know if you're familiar with that.
I am.
And really learned a lot about the brain. I became hungry. It's like all my hopelessness moved towards this hunger for understanding of how trauma impacts the brain. And started doing EMDR, started with the plane crash, worked through that. Like I was really tripped up for 6 years on statistics. You know, I felt like something was wrong and people would be like, Maria, the statistics of that happening, I was convinced I would have a rare form of cancer to the point that I was constantly in the doctor's office 3 times a week, dragging my kids to the doctor's office.
Right.
I'm sure I have this form of cancer. I need you to run these tests. And it was insanity. Yeah. I had gotten down to 113 pounds. I had ulcers in my mouth from how much I was hyperventilating from panic attacks. I was not okay. And it was a really, really, really rough season. But then, so working through that in therapy and doing EMDR, it was my brain needed to reprocess.
So I'm familiar with EMDR because I had a young woman on the podcast, and she was actually my son's fiance.
Okay.
And she works at a military base.
Yeah.
And she does music therapy
I
for
watched this
soldiers.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So with PTSD and TBI. So that's the only reason I know what EMDR was. If it wasn't for that, I wouldn't know. So do you want to explain that for people who don't know?
Absolutely. So EMDR, just in the way that I understand it, and I'm actually in grad school right now for clinical mental health counseling so that I can be a licensed professional counselor and work with people that have
good for
experienced this. But it's eye movement and learning to reprocess trauma and traumatic events that we had gone through. So essentially at a very basic level, we go through a traumatic event. And a lot of people think trauma is defined by our experience we went through. And it's not. It's really defined by how we metabolize our experience. So you can have trauma if you go to get a test at a doctor's office. Your body, however it metabolized that experience, could result in your body processing it as trauma.
Okay.
Now, mine was a traumatic event. And so there was no question about that. And so what happens is the back of our brain, it's almost like the lid flips. That's our survival place. We're in survival mode. I need to survive. And then, so whenever we go through a traumatic event, it's the lid flips and it's survive, survive, survive. It's animal instinct. And then, but the reasoning part of our brain, it doesn't grow. So it just stays the same. So what happens with trauma is you have your lid that's flipped and you're constantly in animal instinct, which we need when we're in unsafe situations.
Right.
But we're not in unsafe situations all the time. But when that lid gets flipped, you don't know, like I said, for 6 years to people, I don't know how to live again. Well, really what I didn't know or have the language for is, the back of my brain, my animal instinct is I need to run. And that is a response of trauma. Yeah. So EMDR takes your reasoning part of your brain and helps it to meet this part of your brain instead of because you can't just live again. You have to rewire almost how do I teach my reasoning to meet this part again? And that's what was happening for me is how do I know how to live after I've experienced, statistically speaking, this won't happen. Well, statistics are a load of shit then for me, you know, that is my new reality.
Yeah.
Statistics are helpful. but they are not an indicator of what will happen or won't happen. My body responded as if it was in fight or flight. Now I can say that, and my body's at peace. It's like, it is what it is. This is my reality. But I can respond. So EMDR allows you to become a responsive person instead of a reactive person. And it uses eye movement to do that.
Right.
It's crazy. There's a lot of therapy that's like talk therapy. And so you're going in the weeds. With this, you're not going in the weeds. The way it was explained to me by my therapist was it's like a candle that's burning. And if you put your finger over it fast, you don't feel the fire. You can touch the fire, but you won't feel it. If you put it over slow, you're going to get burned. She's like, EMDR, where we revisit, it should be like you're going fast over it. You never want to fully feel it. So it was always this like, it was a safe experience that was not invasive.
Yeah.
And like my brain truly reprocessed it.
Yeah.
It felt like magic. I was like, oh, I'm fine again. I was not fine for 6 years and now I'm okay.
That's crazy.
It was amazing. It was amazing. But it was like, and it gave me the realization like, there's healing here. Like it doesn't have to be hopeless. Like there is healing here.
So obviously this was a piece of you going in that 6-year period, going from, survival to healing, fixing to healing. Were there any other things during the 6-year period that kind of flipped that switch from survival to healing?
Oh, you mean like other than therapy?
Yeah.
That's a really good question. It really was the therapy that worked for me.
Okay.
I really had a hard time I'm even uncomfortable talking about it because I'm smiling and that's not a true reflection of how I feel. I had a really hard time relationally with people. I don't know what's perceived or real, but I don't think it matters. It's real to me. Is I always felt this pressure to make a comeback story out of my story.
Yeah.
And my therapy office became my safe place to be honest. And it's always safe to be honest. I always want to be able to show up for myself and be honest. There is a difference knowing that you're going to be honest and not judged or not rushed through it or fixed. Like, oh, I'm uncomfortable with your honesty, so let me say this thing to like cover up what you just said. Versus you can just be honest. I'm not like going to fix it. I'm going to just kind of let you work through it. And so my therapy office was my place where I was just really guttural and honest. And the outside world was just kind of the place where I just always felt this just pressure to not show. And there's like this part of me that wants to say, that's not on other people, that's on me. But also I think there is an actual dynamic that is at play, that when somebody is suffering, people are uncomfortable watching. And the reason why I can say that is because I've sat across from people now that are suffering. And if I'm being honest, it's uncomfortable. In some ways, it's more uncomfortable to watch you suffer than for me to be the one suffering. And I think I understand the temptations to say things to cover it up. Like, it's going to be okay. Or, I know you're hurting, but God's going to use this. Or God's going to take this story and it's going to be a big story. Or, oh, don't cry. Or, oh, you've got so many people around. Or be grateful. Or write a gratitude list. Or make sure you're, worshiping God through the pain. All those things to me are cover-ups. And they say to me, I am so uncomfortable being an onlooker. And what I think or what I wish, and I think that there's only so many people that can do this, and I understand why. There's no judgment in that, because it actually is. There's a real discomfort. I don't think many people are meant to sit with the suffering. I think what would be more honest to say, or more honest, is for us who are the onlookers to be like, what am I feeling right now? I'm feeling really uncomfortable. Well, I don't want to project that onto them, or I'm feeling really uncomfortable, and what I want to do when I'm uncomfortable is cover it up. But I'm not going to.
Yeah.
Instead, I'm going to say, I am really uncomfortable with the amount of pain that you're experiencing. I cannot imagine what it is to carry it. I can't do anything. I don't even know that I want to do anything, but can I sit with you? Can I just be a presence in it with you and let the person suffering decide? Honors the suffering. You're giving them voice when they feel like, when you're suffering, you feel like you're nothing. You're down to nothing. Like you've just been stripped, you know? And to just like, can I just be here?
Yeah.
And it's okay for them to say yes or no.
Right.
So how did I get there? At that time, those 6 years, I think the honest answer is no, therapy was the place. And I didn't know how to connect in with other people.
Yeah.
Honestly, without feeling that pressure. And that pressure kind of caused me to go into hiding internally. Like, I don't think I let people really see me. And also, I didn't let people see me because I was tired of having to explain that I just wanted to be sad.
Yeah. It's kind of crazy to me. It's almost like this vicious cycle, right? So when you're, and I'll put this on me. When I'm hurting, I don't want to project that on somebody because I don't want them to feel my pain.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the same time, they're feeling uncomfortable and they don't want to project that on me because they don't want me to feel uncomfortable. And it's just this.
It is.
Yeah.
It's
just two people chasing their tail.
100%.
Yeah.
I remember at my parents' memorial service, people are walking up and they would be crying harder than I was crying.
Mm-hmm.
And you're in this weird position of comforting other people, you know? And it's okay. That's not a judgment. It's just a reality of the experience that is hard, you know? Like, to be honest, like, I don't want to comfort somebody else right now. And so I remember, like, even just in that, like, that pressure, that's what I mean by pressure, is like, there's these things happening that are invisible that you feel, but you can't see.
Mm-hmm.
And they're really happening. But it's like, how do you navigate that? Like, you don't want to tell somebody, like, I'm not going to tell you to not cry, you know? So how do you show up and just be a grieving daughter in this tragedy? And I say tragedy, it's like, I don't want to be at your fucking funeral. I want you alive.
Yeah. So
that you're still like, you're not even in the grief yet. You're in this, well, you are in grief because you're denial. It's like, this isn't real. This isn't real. This isn't real. And yet you have understanding and empathy that this person is grieving too. It's just bizarre.
It's a weird dynamic. I mean, look, and that's what this show is all about, is letting people understand or letting people know, especially people who are going through shit.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're not alone.
Yeah.
You're not crazy. You're not, I mean, it's messy. Like you said,
it's messy,
really, really messy. And there's no step-by-step program.
Mm-mm.
It is interesting. One of the things I really liked is you used the word honest, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I, just kind of doing the things that I do to help myself, some of them are public.
Yeah.
And I have so many people that are like, really appreciate you being vulnerable
Yeah.
and this and that and the other thing. And I know what they mean. I'm not
Yeah.
trying to shit on them or anything like that. I just hate that word vulnerable and now I realize why, because it's like, I'm just being honest.
Yeah.
Like, this is just me.
Yeah.
Also, at the same time, people are always like, to your point, man, I just admire your strength and all that sort of stuff. And it's like, dude, you have no idea that, like, I'm just trying to keep my head above water.
Yeah.
Like, thank you
Yeah.
for thinking that I'm strong. But the reality is I'm barely hanging on.
Yeah.
And it's a weird, I was saying this, I think I might've been saying it to Rochelle the other night. Like, I've been in class with you and I've worked out next to you and, we've always said not, hi and how you doing and stuff like that. And when I look at somebody like you, you're incredibly fit and, you're always smiling in the gym and all that sort of stuff. There is the last thing that I would have ever thought was that you went through all of these things that you went through. I would have never guessed that in a million. I would have thought you had the perfect life.
Yeah.
It's just, and I'm not exactly sure what the point of that is, other than you just
never know.
Yeah.
You never know. Like, somebody can be smiling and, carrying a lot. And there's just a lot of context to who we are. And there's a lot of healing that has happened. And so I would say that my smiles now are more honest today, where in the past they were a cover up.
Yeah.
It was, I know that you feel more comfortable with me smiling, and so I'm going to do that. But I am not happy.
Yeah.
And I'm depressed and I feel hopeless. And I'm still learning how to sit with those parts of me, because I mean, listen, like, I'm saying that, people don't know how to deal with that. Well, neither do I.
Right.
Like, the reality is I'm uncomfortable with that part of myself. What do I do when I don't know what to do? And sitting with that and realizing, well, what do you do when you don't know what to do, Maria? You just be. And that's like super uncomfortable, because then if I'm going to be, then I got to be honest that I'm not happy or I'm angry, or all the parts of me that I have judgment for are now like right here. And it's just so interesting. Like, you don't ever know what somebody is going through. Nope. And not everybody's going to tell you. And
as a matter of fact, most people won't.
Most people won't.
Yeah.
Most people won't, which is probably why it's so refreshing, that you are, and probably why it feels like vulnerability to people, when really it's just like, I'm being honest, I'm being transparent. Yeah. I'm letting you see. And vulnerability, I think it's interesting that people find honesty and transparency equal to vulnerability, because I don't think it is the same. I think they're different. I think vulnerability is more intimate than transparency. It's, I'm going to let you see all of me. I don't let everybody see all of me, and we shouldn't let everybody see all of us, know? But I will be transparent. And I think when you go through something and it is out there, it's like, there's nothing to hide. So I'll be transparent about it with you. I'm going to absolutely tell you my story. There are people that I will be vulnerable with to parts of my story. I mean, I really have sat with people who are going through, things that like are just really complex and hard. And you have to talk to somebody. You grieve, and then there's this thing called lamenting, which, it is a biblical term, but also like therapeutically. Essentially, lamenting is saying, I need somebody to bear witness to my pain. I need to actually bleed out all over somebody. And if you look at like our culture, we are demanding that. Like, we need that. Like, that's what's happening when we hurt, is we need people to witness it. That's actually a part of healing. And I think that is a beautifully intimate thing. And so there are people that are suffering in silence, and it takes so much courage to let somebody see that. But it's like so needed. And so, like, if I could even say one quick caveat of like, if you dare to be willing to let somebody see you suffer, like you are so courageous. Like that is the most courageous act of fighting for yourself, like to dare to be seen in your suffering. And then if the person you share that with fails you and reshares your story with somebody else, because that's an intimate, sacred space. That is not for the person that heard it to go take it, you know?
Right.
It's essentially somebody just bled out over you and now you're going, they bled on me. And it's like, no. You are bearing the weight of their grief and their pain. They trusted you. And if they misuse that, that's on them. Mm-hmm. But if you did that, like, well done.
Yeah.
Like, well done fighting for yourself.
I think it's what they call a win-win situation, because when you do that, you help yourself.
Yeah.
And the whole point of this show is you also help other people.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't stress that enough. I mean, look, I'm completely honest when I tell people when I first started doing this, it was therapy for me.
Yeah.
Right. But at the same time, the little tales that I would tell, or the, I'll just call them rants that I would have sometimes, were like also, hey, man, like if somebody close to you is grieving, here's some do's and don'ts, like some basic do's and don'ts. And same to your point, we just don't talk about it.
Yeah.
That information isn't out there.
Yeah.
Unless you go to some sort of therapy or something like that.
Yeah.
Then that information is, within the four walls of that session, but it's not readily available out there.
No,
it just
it's
isn't.
not. It's not.
All right. I want to know, you wrote a book called Oh Goodness.
Yeah.
So
my laugh is I'm uncomfortable.
What was the genesis of that? Like, how did that all happen?
Man, I know I've shared this with you. I'm still like reconciling that. So, the book, I wrote the book and I was still very much in survival mode. Yep. I was drinking. I was surviving. And I think, I just spoke about lamenting. Honestly, I think this book was me just needing to be seen and bleed all over the place.
Okay.
I think a part of it was a culmination of a ton of things, and like the media telling my story and seeing it plastered all over, and just that internal, like, that's not right. Yeah. There's like an injustice piece. Like I felt like my voice was taken from me. And I think hindsight, like looking back, I wish that the energy I spent in the book was spent in healing. I look at this as like I was running from. And then at the same time, this is where life is not just all one thing. Like it's being used, I've had therapists come up to me and be like, hey, I'm trying to teach my clients how to share. Can I just like buy your book so I can use excerpts of like what it means to be honest with yourself? And so I'm like, so weird. I never intended it for that, but like it's being used, So I think on a personal level, I'm like, there's parts of, man, I wish I didn't put myself out there yet. I wish I didn't put that out there yet. And also even just, when you go through something like that, there's other people involved in this story. Mm-hmm. And I wish who I am today cares more about my family, like my siblings and the people that I love that are like, family and close to me. And I think I would have slowed down the process and just been like, how are they doing? And is it really time for this? But in the survival of that, I'm like, but it's not fair. It's not fair that the news gets to tell this story. It's not fair. I should have a voice. Me.
Sure.
And grief is selfish. And so I don't know that the Maria back then would have done it ever any different, but the Maria today would. And so I think like just reconciling those parts of myself, the genesis of it was, is God good? And where is his goodness, and where is goodness when life isn't good, and what does that mean? And so that was kind of like the heart behind it. But yeah, I today would have waited. I would have been more still, and I would have sat with myself in that before just writing and putting it out there.
I understand what you're saying. At the same time, anybody can probably say that about any part of their life.
Yeah.
If I knew then what I know now, I
Yeah.
would have done things different. When the reality is maybe doing this is what helped you get
Yeah.
to your healing phase.
Yeah, I do hear that. And it's like you even hear it's hard for me to receive stuff like that because I have a natural tendency to judge myself.
We're always our own hardest critic, worst
Yeah.
critic. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do think so. I mean, you know, it's almost like I needed to have the high to just plummet and reach the bottom, you know, and to really be like, okay, it's time to focus on my healing.
Yeah.
It's time to heal and not run. So
I think so. Immediately when you said I needed the high to reach the bottom, a roller coaster popped into my head. And I feel like when you're going through grief, I mean, it's a nonstop roller coaster.
nonstop.
Like, you know, you're getting blackout drunk and you're at the
Yep.
very bottom. And then all of a sudden you're a published author and you're doing all these
Yeah.
podcasts and all, and you're on this massive high,
Yeah.
you know, and then look, the reality is something else is going to happen. It's
Yep.
going to, hopefully the bottom doesn't go as deep
Yeah.
every time,
Yeah.
you know, and maybe we start to oscillate a little bit less.
Yes.
But I think the reality is, and that's life. That's not just grief,
Right.
but I think it's amplified a little bit
Yeah. I'd agree.
in a fight or flight or survival.
Yeah.
You know, like you said.
Yeah.
So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah. I'd agree. It's definitely been my experience. And I would say so writing the book a few years after, when did I publish that? I think it was just a few years after is when I got sober.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, that took my journey of healing because at that time I was already in trauma therapy. I did trauma therapy. I did EMDR. There is no trauma therapy. It's just EMDR.
Right.
And then therapy that specializes in trauma. But I was still drinking.
Mm.
And I did EMDR on the plane crash, and I remember I was unwilling to go anywhere else because as the plane crash came up, other stuff came up from my past. So when my mom died, it ripped off like all the covering she had on our past, you know? And like I said in the beginning of this is like, I didn't really know who I was outside of my mom. And that's because there's a lot of stored trauma in there. And I was unwilling to touch that.
Mm-hmm.
So I just kept white knuckling life, but also very like with this new sense of like relief of not constantly living in this fight or flight, having panic attacks 3 times a week. I'm like, I got this. I'm good. And then it kind of all came to a head a few years later. And it was when I had started the nonprofit. I wrote the book. I had speaking engagements. Like, to be honest, like I was really trying to make a name for myself in the evangelical church. And like, if I'm just being, you know, that's just what I was doing. And, you know, reached kind of like this peak and kept like, could totally keep going. Like the success was there. I mean, it's kind of embarrassing to say that because like at the same time, I was also like, oh, God's doing this. But the reality is like I was pursuing something.
Right.
And so I hit a peak, had a lot of dopamine going and was, you know, drinking a lot and really riding high on pride and, you know, took a massive just failure, you know, and exposure is humiliating and humbling. And so a lot of people were like, what a joke, what a fraud, you know? And so got really honest with myself, found myself going into rooms that I never thought I would be in AA, Alcoholics Anonymous. And my brother was a part of that, Austin Thomas. And I always had this picture like, oh, Austin Thomas is he's externally the one that's kind of effing up his life. I got my life together. There's always that external comparison I had. So I was always externally okay, but internally I was falling apart. And I would always have moments, though, of jealousy. Like, man, I wish that I could F up like my brother did.
Now, just for clarification, Austin Thomas is your biological brother. Yeah, okay.
Biological brother.
Got it.
Yep. Not the one in the plane crash. And so after that, like, just massive, like, you know, exposure and, you know, the speaking and the engagements and all that just went away, you know, because now it's like, well, you're not going to make a name for yourself here.
Can I jump in real fast?
Yeah.
I find it fascinating that people will rally around you and they'll raise you up and all that sort of stuff when they think that you're perfect. And then they find out, even though nothing has changed, your story is exactly the same, that you have some sort of imperfection that probably, 75% of them have as well. And they completely abandon you and use it as a tool to say, well, look at her. Mm-hmm. She's not as good as us.
Mm-hmm. That's something I'm still working through today. I don't know where I'm at with that. I've been so deeply saturated in that way of life for so long. Mm-hmm. That I don't even align with it after all that not just what I've been through, but the healing of what I've been through.
Right.
That I'm like, I don't know. But there were a few. They're not the masses. The masses are good with like, they'll love you, hate you, love you, hate you.
Right.
Put you on a platform, take you off the platform. Want your testimony, but I don't want your testimony. It's just this like, tug and pull.
I only want certain parts of your testimony.
Yeah.
Right.
And when it's this way. But that's like a whole, I'm still in process with all of that, but there were a few. And those few, I'm like, that's Christianity. Like that's what I want. But they're not the ones on the stage. Mm-hmm. They're not the ones making a name for themselves. So when I say I'm reconciling, it's like, I'm not even after those things anymore. Like there was a time in my life where I was sharing my story to get something. Mm-hmm. And I'm just not there. Like I'm just here to be.
Right.
Be Maria. I don't have an agenda of what comes out of this. I would hope that somebody feels seen in this, even if it's just one person. And that can be healing or unlock some healing, for somebody else. And that's it. But yeah, that has definitely been an experience of, what does this look like for me in these spaces now?
Yeah.
But I do know I have experienced authenticity in it. And I'm like, that is me.
Yeah.
And that is what I want. And that is Christianity. And that looks like and is reflective of the God that I know. And reflective of the scriptures that I read. And so it's just like, but they're not on the stage.
Right.
And so it's just been a whole journey with that.
A journey is putting it mildly, for sure. Okay, so you and Austin Thomas both went to recovery.
Yes. But so here's the thing. Like he was always in and I was always the one that's like encouraging him, never thinking I had a problem. Never thinking I had a problem.
Interesting.
And finally I was like, listen, I don't know if I have a problem with alcohol or not. I don't know if I'm an alcoholic, but I know I can't stop drinking. So I was like, I'm not going to say, I even remember when I went into the rooms, I was like, I'm not going to say, hi, I'm Maria and I'm an alcoholic. but I'll be there.
It's the old saying, I don't have a drinking problem, I have a stopping problem.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And so I went, and it was during COVID. So they call us COVID babies. And that first meeting bawled because I had never felt so understood by people that I have nothing in common with.
Right.
Except this one thing. I'm like, they're telling my story. And that scared me. I'm like, oh my gosh, am I like about to find God in the rooms of AA when I've been trying to find him in the rooms of a church, and just not like, that was just my experience at the time. Like I'd been trying so hard to fit into this one place, and I fit in here, and just like to feel so seen and known and okay with my failures and my mess ups and all of that. It's like, we actually understand it.
Yeah.
I breathed, like truly breathed for the first time. And I remember calling my brother, and he just laughed, and we connected. We connected. We'd always been close, he and I, but we connected on a totally different way.
Sure.
In a totally different way that day. He had always struggled with staying sober. And so it was just in and out, in and out, in and out. And I was always like, come on, Austin, you got this. Like, just stay sober, just stay sober. And now here I am having the hardest time just admitting I have a problem. And it changed the way I saw him. It's similar to like when you go through grief, it changes when you then go through it. And you're like, oh, I never knew.
Yeah.
I never knew all these aspects of it. I never knew the courage it took to go into a meeting and just sit and stay, and to find yourself in the rooms and find solutions in the rooms, especially when you don't want to be there.
Yeah.
And so it gave me a new appreciation for the requests I was making of him, that I'm making a request for you to stay sober is like asking a baby to just walk right out of the womb. It's not, it's similar. What it honestly did is it made me realize like, oh, the way I feel about how people responded to my grief has got to be how you feel when you hear people say, Austin, you need to be sober. This is not an easy journey at all. And so he and I, from that moment, we connected in a new way, in a more personal way. And he was like, yeah, he became somebody that, it wasn't just the therapy rooms that I was honest, or the AA rooms I was honest. Like with my brother, I was really honest with. And that was a really precious relationship with a family member, where there was so much brokenness at one point between us.
Right.
And a lack of understanding, that there was an understanding that both of us had for one another. Like he began to understand me, that I wasn't judging him, that it was fear. You not being sober made me afraid.
Right.
It made me afraid to be around you. I didn't know how to be. I didn't know what to do. Similar to what we are saying we would want in our grief. And then vice versa. Like he was able to tell me how it felt. It felt like judgment. It felt like you only wanted me around when I could be a certain way. And like Maria, like I was really struggling. Like it's really hard for me to stay sober.
Right.
And I'm in pain 24 hours a day, all the time. And so like to just have those conversations with him, and then we actually started to help each other. And it no longer was this, I'm a big sister, to you. It was like, you're my friend, and like, I need you in my life, and vice versa. And so that relationship became really, really special to me. And you don't realize how special somebody is to you until they're gone, sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that was the next tragedy that just hit in August of 2020, I believe. But I got a phone call in the morning that he had texted me the night before. So both my mom and Austin, before they passed, I got a text from. He had texted me the night before, and he was like, hey, I tried calling. I remember I was in Target when he tried to call. And he sent me a text and was like, hey, I'm going to go to bed. I'll talk to you in the morning. And I was like, all right, let's touch base tomorrow morning. And I got a call the next morning that he died. And I mean, again, just that guttural scream in the backyard. I remember I just fell laying on my side, just screaming. It was awful. It was awful. Like, that was my person, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And when I say that, like, that was the person I was honest with. That was the person that knew me vulnerably. And I knew him. And we were fighting for life, like both of us, like for more life, like to live. Like he was fighting to live. And now the fight's over. There's something so abrupt and cold-hearted and mean and unfair about that, you know? Like we were on this journey and now it's just done. And we later found out, got a call from the coroner that he had been given bad pills. He probably did go to take something to fall asleep, knowing him. But it could have been, like the coroner said, like it could have been an Ambien. He said, but it was laced with fentanyl. And he was like, Maria, this is my 8th death this week with a fentanyl death alone.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, it's really, really bad here. And so whatever he took was laced with fentanyl, and he died. And yeah, that was awful. But I was sober, and it was a different experience, you know, than my parents' memorial service. I just was not with it. Like, I don't remember it. I remember parts of it. I remember speaking, and I couldn't even speak. I remember wearing all white because I refused to, like, be in black.
Ew.
Like, I was in such denial and rejected the fact that they died. I was so angry with God, so angry. And with my brother's death, I was really present and really with myself. And I think it was just the practice that I had up until that point of, like, you're not going to run from this, Maria. This hurts like hell.
Yeah.
And you're going to feel it because you love him, and he's worth feeling this for. He's worth feeling everything you're about to feel. He is worth it because grief is love. And so even down to flying there, I had a friend in recovery fly with me just so that I was okay, you know, because I was struggling. I didn't know if I wanted to be sober. I didn't know. It's like, what's, you know, it's just very real things that get uprooted when you go through tragedy. It's like, well, what's the point? It's not just the tragedy that uproots you. It's like your whole worldview is uprooted. It's like, why am I doing what I'm doing, and is it worth it? You have to face those questions because you now have to, like, root yourself again, you know? And it's just the nature of going through tragedy. And yeah, I was just very, very present in all aspects of it. And I remember even, I apologize if this is, like, morbid, like, I remember looking at his body, and I wanted to not look at his body. That's my natural tendency, is to run. Like,
Right.
just, I don't want to be here. I want to avoid. But something in me was like, look, like, he is gone. Like, there was a part of me that needed to accept this. And I mean, I grieved in a way that, like, I mean, it was so painful, but, like, grieving and accepting it at the same time, I don't know. It was just like this ugly and beautiful experience, you know, this like, this shouldn't be, but to face that, this should not be, this should not have happened, and to face that. And same thing, like with the funeral, it's like, I didn't want to leave his side, so I didn't. I did not do anything that like I didn't want to do. I was honest about where I was at. I didn't want to leave his side. I wanted to stand at the top where his head was, and I didn't want to leave it. And nobody was going to move me, and nobody was going to make me move. And I was there, and I was with him. But it was just like a representation of what was going on internally. Is I was with myself, and where I wanted to be was with him.
Yeah.
I wanted to be next to him.
I'm curious because you had said, and this was my personal experience too, that when your mom and dad died, it was disbelief. Like this isn't real. This can't be real.
Yeah.
And that's what I went through when we
Yeah.
lost Connor. It was like there's no way. Like this doesn't even make sense. This can't be real.
Yeah.
So now, because you've had all of this experience and everything, when your brother died, did you feel like it was real, or did you feel?
No, I didn't feel like
Okay.
it was real.
Okay, so same.
And I think that was what I was connecting with, is that this is real.
Okay.
Like, don't run from this, Maria. And I think, and because I had the first experience and I don't remember anything, and I don't know if this is going to make sense to the viewers, but it was something in me is like, I love him so much. I wanted to be honest about my love, and my hurt and pain wants to run, but my love for you would never have left you. Like, I wouldn't have left you when you were suffering as an alcoholic. I think that's what switched with me, and my healing is like, I'm not going to leave you. I don't care. Like, and in a healthy way, you
Right.
know, healthy with boundaries, but my love won't leave you. I will not stop loving you. I won't let fear allow me to stop loving you, even if it means that, hey, we need to have space. I'm going to be rooted in love. And so looking at him, I wanted to not believe it. This is not real. This
Right.
doesn't even look like him. This isn't real. What the fuck is this? Like, how did this happen? Who's this lady that gave him the drugs? And who did that? I was ready to blame. I was ready to go on a witch hunt.
Yeah.
I was ready to do all those things. All those things were Maria running from the reality that I had to fly back here and bury my brother that I was just on the phone with about healing, you know? And so I stayed. I stayed with myself. That's what I mean when I say I stayed with myself. I stayed with the love and not the pain. And it's like, this is the reality. This is what is, Maria. What is, as he's gone, we can worry about all the rest later. Because we did deal with that. We did deal with where did these drugs come from and all that. But right now, be with him.
Yeah.
Be with him. And even down to the actual burial. Like, I couldn't leave him. And so I like sat as the guys were like digging his grave, and everybody had gone at this time. And I had sat there and I just watched until they lowered him in. And I just kept watching as they buried him, like buried it up. And there was just something in me that was like, I'm not going to leave. I'm not going to leave you. And I know that he felt left by people. And a part of that is, you know, and we learn, you know, as you're recovering in AA and taking responsibility of your life, we're not a victim. You know, we made choices. And so people do what they do. But if we weren't doing what we did, then, you know, they maybe wouldn't have left, you know? So it's not this victim mentality and like, oh, I need to prove to him that he's loved. It wasn't that. It was this like commitment to myself. Like, I'm going to be rooted in love. I want to be rooted in love. And love stays up until, you know, the last dirt pile. And his parents weren't there, you know, and when nobody's around, nobody's watching, there's no like cameras, books, nothing. It matters nothing to be there. There's nobody would ever know, you know? Like I wanted him to know, like, no, you are loved that much. I mean, I was pissed at him because I'm like, see, I told you were loved that much.
Right.
But yeah, that it's interesting to lose multiple people that are so close to you and how different the experiences are because the relationships are just so different. And in some ways, Mike, like losing my brother still, and it's not just because it was the most recent, but it hurts differently.
Mm-hmm.
It hurts differently. Not worse, not less, just different. It touches like a really tender part. And I think because my brother confronted parts of me, he was such a teacher to me, but he perceived himself to be such a struggle and such a burden to people.
Yeah.
But the reality is like, Austin, you weren't a burden to people. It's just I didn't know what to do. And I wish I said that to him. And I did at the end of his life. I started to say that to him. And I'm grateful that I got to say those things to him versus living in this fear of like, I can't be around you because you threatened me.
Right.
Like the last few weeks of his death, like we talked and I was on the phone with him and he was again, like in and out of sobriety. And, I can ride for a good year probably before I'm threatened by the drink, Him, it's like if he's out, he's out. He's in, we all struggle in different ways. And
sure.
When he's out, he is out. Like it is life threatening. And so he was really struggling and he was out of sobriety. And, our normal conversations are like, okay, how do you get to the solution? Like, okay, Austin, you got to get back into the rooms. You need to start working the steps. But something about this, like a new thought came into my mind. And I liken it to like God, is instead of telling him what to do, why don't you ask him how he views himself? And I said, Austin, let me ask you this. What do you believe about yourself? And to hear back what he said was just so sad that I was like, man, why would anybody, if you view yourself as that worthless, what's the point of getting sober? Of course he's not motivated to get sober. But like me and so many others in his corner loved him, but we didn't see him, like if we saw him, we would have asked, how do you see yourself?
It's a really powerful question.
Yeah. And it just was like, I'm telling you to get sober. I'm giving you a solution. Why would you take it if you feel like you shouldn't even be alive? If you feel like you damage relationships, if you feel like you're worthless, if you feel like you're nothing. And so it reframed even then. Like, I'm telling you, that man was a teacher to me. And honestly, his life keeps me, like, it just keeps me pressing in. I think about him a lot, even at CrossFit, like when I'm working out and I'm going, I can't. I have a lot of I can'ts in my head. And I think about him because the amount of times he was just flooded with I can'ts, that it's like, I'm tired of the I can'ts robbing my family of life.
Man. Well, like I said, your whole story is literally an onion. You just peel off a layer and peel off a layer and peel off a layer. It's just, I know it's real, but it really sounds like, almost unbelievable.
Yeah.
For one person to go through this many tragedies is just, I think it kind of reframes, at least for me anyway, it reframes, some of my perspective on loss and tragedy for sure. And I want to thank you for sharing. I mean, look, it sounds like to me, this has been a journey, a long journey, and there's still more journey.
Yep.
But I really want to thank you for sharing it, just like the good, the bad, and the ugly, because it really is, it's important and it's meaningful.
Yeah.
And it just, like you said earlier, this type of, or I said, I don't know which one of us said it, this type of information just, it isn't out there.
Yeah.
Everyone wants to skip over the middle part, and they want, this bad thing happened, and then, this amazing thing happened because of it.
Yeah.
Nobody gives a shit about, everything in the middle.
Yeah.
So, but everything in the middle is what's most important.
Yeah. I could not agree more.
Yeah.
And I thank you for even asking me to be on. Like, it's really healing to sit and do this and be where I'm at today, and just to be able to see, like, man, Maria, there has been growth and there has been change. And I'm just grateful to just be here and sit and just to just share with, like, no agenda, and to be able to share in the messy middle,
Yeah.
and to not have the pressure of, okay, what's the comeback story?
Right. Yeah.
I think if there's any takeaway is, like, it's okay to just be where you're at. And it's beautiful right there, and it's painful right there, and there's miracles in that. Like, to just be is just seriously one of the most courageous things that we can do. And then to do that for others, I mean, that is a test. Like, to me, that's the accomplishment for me. It's not all the external stuff. And all the external stuff, I had all the external stuff at one point, while internally just dying. And so all of that is just, like, meaningless without the heart. And to focus in on the internal, and then let the internal be an expression of the external, like, that's what I'm about. And I feel like this podcast is about that as well. And so thank you for inviting me in to share.
All right. You're welcome. And yes, I think you summarized it pretty well. I might have to rewrite the definition of the podcast on the website. Maria, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
I have really, I get something out of every single person I talk to.
Mm-hmm.
I have a lot that I'm going to reevaluate and readdress after this. That was just a lot of really amazing, inspiring, educational, informative, just a lot of good stuff.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you.